Here it is, everybody. The GameCube versus... Well, this is just a GameCube you control with a stick. Yes, fellas, I think this is a pretty interesting matchup because, while the Wii is the GameCube's successor, the Wii and GameCube are very similar hardware-wise. You know, that's one of the biggest things a lot of people say about the Wii. You know, infamously, it's been referred to as two GameCubes taped together. Well, it isn't just that. The Wii's graphical capabilities aren't all too much better than what the GameCube could do. You know, the GameCube was a pretty weak performing console for Nintendo. You know, as much as we all love it, the GameCube didn't do nearly as well as the competition at the time. You know, the Nintendo 64 was already Nintendo just trying to make a powerful console, and they already kind of screwed up using game cartridges because that really limited how many games people could actually make for this thing. These cartridges were expensive, they could barely store much, but the N64 by itself was a pretty powerful console. So the GameCube was pretty much just, let's do the N64 again, but better. You know, it didn't really have a massive gimmick involved with it. It was just, this is the next Nintendo console. And, you know, when you look at the sales, you know, N64 sold about 32 million and then GameCube sold about 21 million. It's obvious Nintendo had to do something different. They couldn't just make, oh, a more powerful console. Basically the GameCube again, but better. So for better or worse, they went over to the Wii, and I would say it's for the better. But doing this did have some drawbacks. I would say the Wii has some of the highest highs and lowest lows of any of Nintendo's consoles. Some of the greatest games Nintendo's ever produced are on this thing. Some of the most unique, interesting uses of motion control, just some of the most creative games ever. But then, on the exact opposite side of things, it has some of the absolute worst games of all time on it. Now, of course, every console has some of the worst games of all time, but no, the Wii is different. All the crap on this thing, it is absurd. And I think the Wii's success kind of made Nintendo blind to like what to do next. And that's how we got the Wii U. But of course, if we didn't get the Wii U, we wouldn't have gotten the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2. So overall, even if the Wii kind of put Nintendo on a weird path, as much as that path went downhill in some areas, it also went uphill because that's how we got Nintendo to make the Nintendo Switch one of the best-selling consoles of all time. But we wouldn't have gotten this without this. So, now listen, my personal experience with both of these consoles. I mean, I owned both of them as a kid. You know, the GameCube was my first home console that I owned, brand new, not a hand-me-down, not nothing. This was just my console, and I loved it so, but I really didn't get the most out of it. The first game I got for this was the Game Boy player adapter, so I could play all my Game Boy games on the GameCube. That was cute, but things didn't really get started until I actually got some standalone, actual GameCube games. And pretty much for the most part, the only games I owned on the GameCube were all licensed kids games. Mostly all SpongeBob ones, man. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom is a legendary game. Of course, a lot of people grew up with that game, much like I did. And a lot of people act like it is literally one of the greatest games of all time. Whoa, take it easy there, buddy. It's a good kids game. It's a very well-made licensed game from 2003. Let's not go much further than that. Still have a ton of memories with that thing, and you know, I remember playing Sonic Mega Collection. Oh, the Simpsons Hit and Run, that was fun. I remember playing a ton of Mario Kart Double Dash at a friend's house, and that same friend, I actually bought his copy of Mario Sunshine off of him. And then at GameStop, I was able to pick up Pac-Man World 2 for $5 after playing this at my cousin's house. Yeah, so I always heard a lot of people say the GameCube didn't have great third-party support, and I was always like, what are you talking about? This was always my checkmate, atheists. Now, but I understand looking back at the GameCube's library, which is very full. Like, the GameCube's library is meaty enough to get you by, but you compare it to the PS2 and Xbox, and you just see a lot of holes in the GameCube lineup, you know? Like, yeah, you had a lot of third-party games on the GameCube, but for the most part, they weren't really, like, the third-party games that everybody wanted to play in that era. You know, like the Grand Theft Autos, for example. Like, where were those? I mean, like, those were the best-selling games in that generation, but of course, like, no, the GameCube didn't get anything like that. Again, I played The Simpsons Hit and Run. That was my GTA. But I think for a kid, the GameCube was, like, absolutely perfect back in the day. You know, you're not paying attention to gaming news. You're not paying attention to like, oh, all these games that I can't play on the GameCube. You're just playing the games that are gifted to you on your birthday, Christmas, or the games that they saved up for because you saw it on the shelf at the store and it's just like, oh boy. So yeah, when I've heard people complain about the GameCube, I was kind of like, I don't get it. Oh, wow, don't have great third-party support? What the hell are you talking about? We're absolutely swimming in this shit. Yeah, okay, that's just the thing. As a kid, I thought this was substantial third-party support. I'm like, wow, this is what all the game consoles are getting. They're getting all these great games that I give a damn about. Fucking licensed kids games based on movies at the time. Yeah, the GameCube always got those because it was mostly kids buying games on the platform. So yeah, you got a lot of games on the GameCube, but you know, it was different compared to the PS2. But damn, man, like, the GameCube's first-party exclusive lineup was incredible. Like, some of the best Nintendo games ever on this thing. And of course, like, I think you can say that about literally, like, every Nintendo console. But the GameCube just had game after game after game in every Nintendo franchise you could want a game in at the time. Mario, Zelda, Metroid, F-Zero, Star Fox, Fire Emblem, Pokemon, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers. Honestly, the only franchise that kind of missed out on the GameCube was Kirby. And you at least got Kirby Air Ride, which is a very beloved game, but, you know, no traditional Kirby mainline game. But even then, you know, Kirby Air Ride. People love Kirby Air Ride, so it's just like, you know, whatever, man. Honestly, for its simplicity and just sheer quality, I think the GameCube will always be my favorite console. However, the Wii ain't that far behind. And like I said, I think the Wii's thing is it has higher highs and lower lows. Like, things got even crazier with this console in really good ways and also in really bad ways. But overall, like, I remember hearing about the Wii around like 2007 or so. And man, this thing was hard to get. Like, nobody could ever just walk into a store and pick up a Wii. Like, no, I remember my parents and I would go into stores, and a lot of times we just asked the guy there, it's just like, do you have any Wiis in stock? And they were just like, yeah, just got them in this morning, and they immediately all sold. I think what ended up happening was that my mom actually ended up going on eBay and paying like a bit extra to get a Wii because she was just tired. She was just tired of looking, and you know, it just felt like, oh man, the Wii is the big thing. Everybody needs to have a Wii. Everybody wants a Wii, which this was almost like night and day compared to the GameCube. Like, the GameCube barely sold anything, and you couldn't pay people to buy a GameCube. The Wii was flying off of store shelves. Everybody wanted a Wii. And I think a big element was the fact that Nintendo really marketed this thing for everybody. It wasn't just for kids or gamers or anything like that. You know, they marketed towards people who weren't traditionally playing video games. And I think we can all look at the Wii and thank it for the fact that, like, nowadays, like, video games are like the biggest form of entertainment out there. Even if a lot of that is from mobile devices and everything. Hey, I think without the Wii showing casual people that video games are fun, that we wouldn't be in the position we are today where video games are as big as they are. I mean, let me tell you, like, people were terrified of holding a controller. They were like, I have no idea what to do with this thing. And with the Wii and Wii Sports specifically, it was so easy for everybody to understand what to do, and everybody pretty much instantly had fun with it. I have a ton of memories with my parents and other family members of just enjoying Wii Sports and a couple of other Wii games. And I just felt like it was so cool to be able to enjoy these kind of experiences with all the people around me, regardless of how old they are, or even if they enjoy video games to begin with. But that's not to say the Wii didn't offer more hardcore experiences. Obviously, the entire vibe of this console was meant to appeal to the everyman, but there's still a ton of hardcore video games on this thing. You know, for how casual oriented the Wii was, there was still a fair amount of M-rated or more hardcore, mature themed video games on it. It was almost kind of like a gimmick to see a game like Mad World designed specifically for the Wii, where this is like one of the bloodiest games ever created. And on the Nintendo side of things, while Nintendo did do a lot more casual themed games, stuff like the Wii series or Endless Ocean, honestly, a lot of the games Nintendo put out were more directly aimed at core fans. You had Metroid Prime 3, Donkey Kong Country Returns was notoriously difficult, Sin and Punishment Star Successor, a sequel to a Japan-only rail shooter on the N64. And then you also have one of the greatest RPGs of all time, Xenoblade Chronicles. Like, the Wii had a ton of variety in its library. But is that such a good thing? Of course, shovelware is the biggest problem with the Wii. Like, if you go into a store and you're looking through the Wii games, 90% of the stuff on the shelf is absolute trash. And that's the case with a lot of consoles. Like, most consoles have a good chunk of bad games on it, but, you know, bad games on the Wii are very special in the sense that it feels like the quality control went down a couple of pegs. You know, the GameCube has bad games, but even the worst games on the GameCube feel like substantial enough. You know, they definitely had a budget here, and they definitely had a decently sized team working on this. And even if it came out like ass, you know, it's just like, hey, you know, this does feel like an actual product made by a company. A lot of Wii shovelware feels like a good couple of dials worse than that. Like, it just feels like the budget's even lower, the teams are even smaller, the quality is 10 times worse. Like, the worst GameCube games would probably be like a 5 out of 10 on the Wii. And then in addition, the Wii Remote's controls are definitely a bit controversial. Some people absolutely love them, some people hate them, and some people are completely like in between because, you know, truthfully, there's a lot of things the Wii Remote does really well, and then there's a lot of things that a lot of developers did too much with this thing, and yeah, it ended up just being really annoying. Pointer control with the Wii Remote works great. That's kind of the Wii's secret sauce, you know? Like, so many games are made a million times better because you can just simply aim with the Wii Remote and get such great precision with that. But then so many games just use waggling. Like, that's all the Wii Remote is for them. And I think it really sucks because a lot of time waggling is used to replace like a button press or something. But a lot of games use it in like incredibly annoying ways where I'm just thinking like, God damn, why can't I just use the A button? And many games act like they're doing way more than just, you know, reading if you're waggling the Wii Remote or something. And a lot of games don't read it properly. They don't read it well. They don't know what to look for. I'm not opposed to waggling in certain instances, but many games just didn't use the Wii Remote's capabilities properly, in my opinion. So yeah, it seems like these two consoles are a pretty decent matchup. I mean, they do both use similar hardware. Hell, you can use GameCube controllers and play GameCube games on the Wii itself. The Wii, in many ways, is like a souped-up GameCube, so I think it's kind of cool to compare both of these and just see, like, which one really ends up the better console with the categories I picked out today. I'm gonna pit these two consoles against each other in 5 categories, and whoever wins, wins. First one is design, and we're gonna be talking about the design of the console and the controllers, how the controllers look and feel and all of that. Round 2 is capabilities. We're talking graphical capabilities and also just like what exactly can the console do. Number 3 is value. Which one was a better value in their respective time? And also these days, like, which one do you get more value from picking up? Number 4 is game library. Just straight up, which one had the better game library? And round 5 is legacy. Which one left a bigger impact on Nintendo and video games as a whole? So let's start off with round 1, design. All right, so round 1, design of these consoles and controllers. Which one has the better one? Now, I would say both of these consoles have pretty striking visual designs. You know, they don't really look like a ton of other consoles. The Wii comes with a stand and it goes vertically and it's supposed to like present to you in your living room. It feels like it's meant to be an immediate showpiece for anybody that walks in and just like, oh wow, you have a Wii. You know, that's what the stand tells me. It just looks so cool. The GameCube, wow, you're gonna be shocked. It's a GameCube. For sure, I think the Wii console itself is a lot more immediately striking. The GameCube is more so kind of cute. The fact that it's like, oh yeah, it's a cube. The thing is, while both consoles are incredibly compact designs, the Wii, it just pretty much fits all of a GameCube in an even smaller package. You know, the fact that you can flip up the top and, oh my God, there's 4 GameCube ports just hiding. Now listen, I think the GameCube's design is so neat, but at the same time, I do have to admit, it's not like that much more unique than all these other game consoles. What's the main complaint people have about like the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X or just whatever, any other generic game console? it's just a black box. And the GameCube, specifically the black model, is quite literally a black box. But the fact that it is so cube-shaped, I think is so fun about it. And, of course, who could forget that damn handle? The GameCube's design almost doesn't even work without the handle on the back, and it's so weird. You know, I mean, people have nicknamed the thing the lunchbox, you know, and that's what it kind of is, you know? You can carry it around, and I think Nintendo was really pushing the fact that this is a very compact game console that's really pushing you to play 4-player local multiplayer with people by bringing it over to their house, plugging it in, all of that stuff. I think the handle is also kind of funny because it's not like the GameCube is heavy or hard to hold without it. Now, something like the original Xbox, that big hunk of yeah, that thing needs a damn handle. The GameCube doesn't really need a handle, but I do feel like it kind of helps complete the design and gives it a lot more character. However, when I take a look at the Wii is kind of in its own class of design. There was truly nothing else that looked like the Wii. I think my main thing is the GameCube is cute, the Wii looked cool. It looked modern, sleek, and it was pretty much everything the GameCube was, but, you know, much smaller, even more compact. You get rid of the stand, you put the Wii on its side, and like, yeah, it's like literally a third the size of the GameCube. I love the GameCube, love it to death, but I do feel like the Wii has a better design for the overall console. And you also have 2 other variants of the Wii if you really want to mix things up. You have the Wii Family Edition, which gets rid of literally all of the cool aspects of the Wii's design. Yeah, they changed things up. They get rid of the stand. They also got rid of the GameCube ports hidden by the top flap, and they reorient all of the lettering on the Wii's console to make it so then you lay the Wii on its side. And I've already seen a ton of people lay the Wii on its side, you know, back in the day. It was kind of a space-saving measure because, you know, quite frankly, the stand is not necessary. The Wii stand just makes it look cooler. When you get rid of that and you put the Wii on its side, it's just a small game console. It's not that interesting. I don't think the Family Edition is anything to write home about. But the Wii Mini, though, as dumb as this console is, because it was fundamentally a Wii that they ripped pretty much everything of worth out of it outside of the ability to play Wii games. You know, there's no internet access, no GameCube support, nothing. But that design honestly reminds me a bit of the GameCube with its top-loading disc tray and whatnot. It's definitely interesting. It looks kind of retro and funky and all of that. But even though it is comparable to the GameCube, I would say the GameCube does look cooler than the Wii Mini. However, overall, I gotta give the console side of things to the Wii for the initial model. And to be honest, it's the model everybody had. Not many people had the Wii Family Edition or the Wii Mini. Those hit after like 2011. Like, how many people were buying a Wii at that time? It was all about that initial model. However, this round also includes the controllers as well. And this is tricky. All right, so here we have the GameCube controller. Not only the GameCube controller, but the Wavebird version of the GameCube controller. You know, Nintendo's wireless GameCube controller. I find Nintendo's naming schemes during this generation to be a little weird for some of their accessories and whatnot. You know, the fact that the wireless GameCube controller is called the Wavebird. Honestly, I remember back in the day, I kind of thought this was like a third-party, non-official GameCube controller just because it was called the Wavebird. Kind of sounds like something you'd expect to get from like Mad Catz or something. Kind of reminds me of the e-reader for the Game Boy Advance. Like, I never thought that was like an official Game Boy Advance accessory. It just sounded like some random thing some other company made. But the GameCube controller has always been one of my favorite controllers. Now, I think in recent memory, I don't think this is the best controller of all time. Honestly, stuff like the Nintendo Switch Pro controller and Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller, I think are better than this. But still, as I hold this thing, it is crazy how well this thing fits in my hands. Like, just the grips are like the perfect shape. And just when I'm holding this, like, everything just falls into place. It is insane how well shaped the GameCube controller is. But I wouldn't really call it like perfect with everything. I respect a lot of the design decisions they made here, but a lot of this isn't ideal for like every game. I don't think the GameCube controller is a perfect one-size-fits-all because, you know, they do some interesting design decisions that I respect and I think work well for some games, but for others, they're just kind of weird. Stuff like the face button placement here. I think it's really interesting that they really made the A button the biggest one, and then you have kind of side buttons all around it. You know what I really like about this? You don't need to learn the controller controller at all to just be able to use this really naturally. A lot of games will just tell you like, hey, you know, hit this jelly bean shaped button. And you can tell like, it's just like, oh yeah, it's the one up here. You're not gonna get Y confused with X because Y is the one that's completely horizontal. It's on the top. Well, I think this is a very smart button layout. I do think the diamond configuration that pretty much every other controller follows it's the way to go. I think it's cool that A is kind of considered like, yep, this is the one. This is always your go-to button. But I do think it makes a lot more sense for them to all have kind of like an equal opportunity, I guess. The analog stick feels great. I love the grip here. But then you have the C stick, which is good, you know, but like for, you know, they just make it so much smaller because from Nintendo's perspective, this stick is all about the camera control. It's kind of the secondary stick. And, you know, when things were kind of heating up with first-person shooters in this generation, you know, this works, but it doesn't feel as good as it could have. There's a reason why analog sticks these days are both, like, the same size and feel. The fact that they only have a Z button here and nothing else there, that's a little strange. And the D-pad is just so small that, like, I'm just kind of like, what's even the point of using this thing? But for the most part, while the GameCube controller has a bunch of funk to it, it is always going to be one of my favorite controllers of all time, just because it feels so damn good to use this. It just feels natural. Now, by comparison, the Wii Remote. I wouldn't really say the Wii Remote feels as perfect as the GameCube controller does. And in some ways, it's more functional. In other ways, it's not as functional. One thing that I always found very commendable about the Wii Remote is how versatile it is. I mean, like, you know, you can hold it like this. You can plug a nunchuck in here. You can put it on its side and boom, it's like an old school NES gamepad. But I will say, I'm not a huge fan of playing games horizontally with the Wii Remote. I find the D-pad to just not be the most comfortable. And many times the games that use this controller setup oftentimes need more than 2 buttons here, and they will often map kind of crucial gameplay functions to shaking the controller, something like Donkey Kong Country Returns and New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It's fine. It's just not my favorite thing. I'm fine with motion control, man, but like when it comes to pinpoint precision video game design, having to shake the controller is not my favorite thing to do. And, you know, I always found it weird that they used a D-pad here instead of like an analog stick. To get an analog stick, you need to plug in a nunchuck. And I don't think the nunchuck is bad, but I've never really been a fan of how lightweight it feels. Like, it just feels like there's nothing to this damn thing. You plug that in and then boom, you sort of have all the buttons you need. You don't have a second analog stick, but the Wii Remote's pointer can do that for you and stuff like first-person shooters. But in a game like, let's say, Mario Galaxy, to use the camera, which is a very limited camera, you can only use the D-pad here. There's tons of cute little features of the Wii Remote. For example, the speaker, which is, you know, I mean, it's kind of fun when it's used, but it's really not very like necessary. Overall, I can't say the Wii Remote is one of my favorite controllers, but I do think it brought way more innovation than something like the GameCube controller did, which was just kind of like any other controller out there at the time, just kind of like funked up in certain ways. I think the GameCube controller feels a lot better than the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. I don't think this feels bad, but it's not necessarily my favorite control method for video games. It can be for certain video games, but it's not perfect for everything. A lot of people really like this controller setup for first-person shooters. For something like Pikmin with new play control Pikmin, this is the best controller setup for that game. But in my opinion, like, none of the buttons and the feel of this feel nearly as nice as the GameCube controller. But we can't take away just how innovative and cool the Wii Remote was back in the day. The fact that we can point with it, we can swing it around, all of that stuff. So what is it? Do we want a controller that is very good, has a couple of weird little design decisions about it, but overall feels great in the hand? And honestly, you know, it's a testament to how amazing this controller is. Like, Nintendo has re-released it numerous times. A bunch of Wii games can actually use the GameCube controller, and they re-released it for Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, re-released it again for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and much like pretty much all of the consoles Nintendo re-releases with Nintendo Switch Online's Nintendo Classics section, they have a fully wireless version available for for Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, it's a controller that just doesn't die. The Wii Remote, by comparison, I mean, like, it sort of hasn't died. The Wii U kept using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, and the Nintendo Switch 1 and 2 Joy-Con controllers, you can see as, like, a successor to the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. Like, the way they both work, holding both separately and doing motion control, that still lives on with the Joy-Con. But I'm telling you, it says a lot that the GameCube's controller design just refused to die over the years. I think the Wii Remote and Nunchuck did a lot more for the gaming industry, for better or for worse. Whereas the GameCube, I mean, the Wavebird wireless controller was a giant leap for wireless controllers. Like, wireless controllers existed before this, but they weren't very good. A lot of time they'd use like infrared, almost like a TV remote, so you'd have to keep it pointed at the exact spot where the signal will be reached. This one doesn't do that, and it works like a dream. The battery life lasts forever. The battery life on the Wii Remote, for some reason, this damn controller always corrodes batteries. It's disgusting. What is it, man? I mean, the Wii Remote was immediately more impressive and more fun, but I don't think it's as everlasting as the GameCube controller was. The GameCube controller is just a damn good controller. The Wii Remote is definitely more gimmicky and has way more flaws. However, I would say it did a lot more. It really kept pushing things forward and offered brand new experiences you couldn't get elsewhere. Man, I might have to give it to the Wii, just because the GameCube, while the controller is great, you know, there's not a ton here that we haven't seen before. And a lot of the design elements I think are cute. There's a reason why modern controllers don't do this. So considering all of that, round one, I think the Wii takes the point here. All right, next up for round two, we're talking capabilities. Now, this can be about graphics and also just generally like what can these consoles do? Some of the gimmicks, some of the features, all of that. Graphically, oh, you know for a fact GameCube wins. The Wii has some incredible looking games, but you know, let's be honest, you know, at the time of its release, the Wii was the worst console graphically. Like, it did not hold a candle to what else was going on at the time. It notoriously was very GameCube-like in terms of its specs. Now, the GameCube, by comparison, was actually more powerful than the PS2. Maybe not as powerful as the original Xbox, but it definitely held its own in that generation. And while I'm not sure some of the best looking Wii games could have run as well on GameCube, something like, let's say, Super Mario Galaxy, like that looks absolutely phenomenal. Not sure if that game in its entirety would run as well as it does on GameCube, but at the same time, I think a lot of GameCube games honestly look better than Wii games. Hell, even comparing some Nintendo releases, and of course a lot of this comes down to art style and whatnot, but I think something like the Wind Waker looks better than Skyward Sword on the Wii. Yes, the Wii is more powerful overall, but I think just based on the times in which both of these consoles came out, I think the GameCube wins kind of in the graphical department. Now, of course, when comparing these two systems in terms of what they offer, I think we do want to keep in mind the time in which these consoles came out. So when it comes to features, you know, the Wii is just jam-packed with a ton of features, but you know, I want to be fair here because a lot of these features just weren't viable during the GameCube days. But at the same time, they kind of were. So the Wii was very much an internet-connected device. Of course, that was kind of one of the Wii's big downsides, is the fact that it could do so much with the internet, but it just didn't go that extra mile. And stuff like online multiplayer was kind of a pain with the Wii. You had friend codes, which nobody liked, and then the online multiplayer itself was always incredibly spotty on the console. Like, sometimes it was good with stuff like Mario Kart, and then other times, obviously, with something like Super Smash Bros. Brawl, it was just not great. Now, the GameCube was capable of online multiplayer. The problem is, barely any games used it. You had, like, Phantasy Star Online, and that was basically it. Now, I wouldn't expect a game console like this to have a robust online infrastructure at the time. You know, even the PS2 could connect online and had quite a bit more online multiplayer enabled video games. However, it still paled in comparison to the original Xbox. And even then, the original Xbox's online infrastructure, that paled in comparison to what the Xbox 360 did. But obviously, I think the GameCube could have done a lot more with the internet. But at the time, Nintendo was kind of like, nah, gamers don't want online multiplayer. okay. And even though during this era, the original Xbox was dabbling with downloadable content and downloadable Xbox Live Arcade games, wasn't nearly to the level things were at during the 7th generation. And the Wii definitely followed suit with that with the Wii Shop channel. So I'm not going to hold that against the GameCube, but I will hold how it pouted about online multiplayer like crazy against it. But it's all good. What other features does it have? Well, it can't play DVDs or music CDs. That was kind of a big selling point of the PS2 at the time. And the original Xbox could do that too. And, you know, the GameCube could not. There's a clock and calendar built into the user interface. That's something. The boot up sequence, if you hold certain button combinations, it makes certain different noises. That's fun. Yeah, the GameCube was genuinely a game cube. You couldn't really do a ton else with it other than play video games, but you could play a fair amount of video games on this thing. I think it had one of the best accessories ever released, which was the Game Boy Player, enabling you to play pretty much every Game Boy game possible on the GameCube, on the big screen. That's awesome! And with the amount of stuff released on the Game Boy line of systems, you could theoretically play like pretty much every generation of Nintendo prior to that on the GameCube. You know, you had a bunch of NES games released on like Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance had a bunch of Super Nintendo games re-released on it. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask on the N64 were re-released on the GameCube via this Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition disc. Sure, it's not everything at all, but hey, I mean, the GameCube can technically kind of play every generation of Nintendo released prior to it. The Wii definitely took things quite a bit further, though. You know, you have the Wii Shop channel, and you can download just dozens upon dozens of NES games, SNES games, N64 games, and not only that, you can play GameCube discs on the Wii and plug in GameCube controllers and just play as is. Now, unfortunately, you cannot connect the Game Boy Player to the Wii. I remember I tried as a kid. I looked at every single angle of the Wii possible and thought to myself, how can I connect a Game Boy Player to this? I was stumped. So that is kind of something that the GameCube has that the Wii doesn't. You know, the Game Boy Player, Game Boy games, all on that thing. The Wii can play a ton of games though, and I don't really necessarily think it 100% evens out, because like the GameCube fundamentally can just play a bunch of Game Boy games. The Wii can play so many other systems. However, these days, the Wii Shop channel doesn't work anymore. So that huge element of the Wii, I mean, isn't really here. I mean, yeah, you can hack the Wii and you can still access all of this stuff. But again, I kind of like to talk about these systems within the time frame of their relevancy, while also considering like how they are these days. So that is something to consider. But I think all the other things you can do with the Wii, the Me channel, the Photo channel, and then all of the cool channels that were connected to the internet, and they did shut down eventually, but they were still really cool. Stuff like the News channel, Forecast channel, Check Me Out channel, Everybody Votes channel. And honestly, it's kind of a no-brainer. The Wii could do a ton. And not only that, but eventually they had Netflix on here, Hulu. I remember back in the day, I downloaded the Internet channel, which was a pretty crappy internet browser for the Wii for $5. But still, it was pretty cool. And I remember when I would come home from school, I would watch YouTube videos via the internet channel on my TV. That was how I watched YouTube videos on TV back in the day. There really wasn't any other way to do that back then, and the Wii enabled that, and that was really cool. I mean, I could go on with the features of the Wii console, and the GameCube definitely had some cool stuff going on with it, but overall, like even back in its day, the GameCube is a pretty no-nonsense game console. It's got some funky things, but for the most part, you can't really do a ton with it other than play GameCube games. Of course, there was the Panasonic Q, which was only released in Japan and was kind of like a DVD player GameCube hybrid. But that's just the thing, like I have a Panasonic Q, and what's annoying about it is the fact that it's pretty much just a GameCube and a DVD player duct taped together. Like you have to click on DVD mode, you have to click on GameCube mode. It's one of those things that I feel like they put into production to have it so then the GameCube could possibly stand a chance against the PS2, which was just dominating at the time. But it's like, bro, like this is literally no different from just buying a DVD player and buying a GameCube. Sure, the shares one outlet, but it's also like, this is just such a giant clunky device that like, why would I do this? And plus it only released in Japan, so who the hell cares? Okay, well, I think GameCube definitely wins in terms of graphics overall, you know, for the time of its release. I think with the amount of features that the Wii console has, and with the fact that, like, you know, for the most part, the Wii does have higher highs where it's just like, yeah, the best looking Wii games are better looking than the best looking GameCube ones. So I think overall with this round, the Wii takes it yet again. Next up with round 3, we have value. Which of these game consoles gave you the most bang for your buck at the time? Well, the GameCube initially retailed for $199 at launch. The Wii retailed for $249 at launch. Now, keep in mind, the Wii was also backwards compatible with GameCube software, so you were kind of getting, like, you know, a baked-in game library, in addition to all of the downloadable games you could get from the Wii Shop channel and everything. You had a lot you could play on the Wii right off the bat. The GameCube was not backwards compatible with the N64. Hell, even with the Game Boy Player at launch, like, that wasn't there. Like, the Game Boy Player was introduced in, like, 2003. But let's keep in mind, what was the competition like at the time? The PS2 and original Xbox both retailed for $299 at launch. So, the GameCube automatically was $100 less expensive. Now, the Wii was quite a bit less expensive than the PS3, which, you know, was like $499, $599. But in comparison to the Xbox 360, you know, the Xbox 360 that you probably wanted around this time was the 20 gigabyte model, which was $399. But they also had the Xbox 360 Core at $299, and that was only $50 more expensive than the Wii. But the Core had, like, no internal storage at all, and like, it was just a lot cheaper overall. But it's also like, hey, I mean, if you just wanted to get started and you wanted something a little cheaper, that could get you by. But I do find it a little crazy that the Xbox 360, even as basic ass as the Xbox 360 Core was at the time, was only $50 more expensive than the Wii. And the Wii was always seen as kind of like that cheapo option, like, oh my god, it's so much less expensive. And it's like, not really. Compared to the Xbox 360, it was always pretty comparable in price. But of course, $50 is a decent chunk of money. But I do find the difference in price with the GameCube and its competitors to be a lot more striking than the difference in price between the Wii and, at the very least, the Xbox 360, especially considering the enormous power difference between a Wii and a 360. Now, both of these consoles experienced quite a few price drops throughout their life. You know, the Wii went down to $200 and then $150, and then eventually settling around like $130 until they redesigned it with the Wii Mini at $99 flat. And the Wii Mini just stripped out too much stuff to get it down to that $100 price point. I mean, they already stripped out stuff with like the Wii Family Edition and stuff to get to that $130 price point. But then what? For an extra $30, you rip out the online capabilities? Like, come on, guys. The GameCube, by comparison, they didn't have to rip out much for it to go down to $100. GameCube hit $150 in 2002 and then hit $100 in 2003. So it is pretty wild that both of these systems' final price points were $99. But even then, in the used market, nowadays, just looking on eBay, I'm seeing most reasonable listings for owning a GameCube is about $60 or so. The Wii, I'm seeing things kind of go back down a bit, and I'm actually seeing Wiis for around $40, $50. So I'm actually seeing cheaper Wiis out there. And you know what's kind of good about the Wii is the fact that it's really easy to hack and you can do all kinds of stuff with it, in addition to the fact you can still play GameCube games on it. Now, here's the annoying thing about GameCube games on Wii. The fact that you always have to select the disc channel with the Wii remote. Garbage. I hate it. It's annoying because you gotta get this controller ready, all to then swap immediately over to this one. But let's be honest here. I mean, that's kind of worth the discount. You get 2 game consoles in one pretty much. Now, in their time, I do think the GameCube at $100 was a bit of a better deal than what the Wii ended up being at $100, which was the Wii Mini, which was no internet functionality for the Wii, and you didn't even have GameCube support anymore. They stripped that out. So yeah, I do think a GameCube at $100 is a better deal than a Wii Mini at $100. To be fair, that Wii Mini did come with a copy of Mario Kart Wii, their best online multiplayer game, and you cannot play it online on the Wii Mini. Hooray. But overall, yeah, I think value-wise, the Wii made the most sense. And even nowadays, like, it is generally cheaper to get a Wii just because there were more out there. And pretty much most Wiis out there you can still play GameCube games on, and the Wii is one of the best consoles to hack. And even back in their days, the Wii generally always came bundled with 1, even 2 games sometimes. GameCube had bundles as well, but for the most part, the $99 GameCube was just that. It was just the GameCube. Sometimes you get bundles here and there, but the Wii almost always had games bundled in with the console. So, yeah, I mean, if the Wii wins this round, then we already know who's gonna win, because the Wii's already won the first 3 rounds. But you know what? These two matter, man. Even if the Wii won the past 3 rounds, we gotta figure out which one of these had the best game lineup. All right, now this might be one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, because both of these consoles have wonderful lineups. I genuinely do think the GameCube's lineup is the most consistent Nintendo console lineup out there. However, I do feel like the Wii potentially has higher highs, you know, like not every Nintendo franchise hit the Wii, you know, we didn't get a Star Fox, F-Zero, anything like that. But if we compare stuff like the Mario games, I mean, obviously, I think the Wii takes the crown here. I mean, not only do I think Mario Galaxy is better than Mario Sunshine, which I like Mario Sunshine, but it's definitely kind of one of the lesser 3D Marios. It definitely has far more problems than a lot of the other ones. Galaxy it's my favorite game of all time, so it's just like, what more can I say? But in addition to Galaxy 1, you get Galaxy 2 and also New Super Mario Bros. Wii as well. So we get 2D Mario and 2 3D Marios. That is insane. GameCube just got 1 3D Mario. But with Zelda is a bit trickier. I would honestly say the GameCube had a better supply of Zelda games. We started off with the Wind Waker, then we got Four Swords Adventures, which was, you know, a really interesting multiplayer top-down 2D Zelda game. And just the fact that the GameCube technically did have a 2D Zelda is really interesting. Like, I don't really think about that. And especially during the GameCube era, the idea of, oh, 2D and 3D versions of this game series on this home console, I mean, it just wasn't as common as it was starting with the Wii era. But then to end out the GameCube generation, we got Twilight Princess, which, yes, it did launch with the Wii, but, you know, Twilight Princess was originally meant to be a GameCube exclusive Zelda game, and it became a launch title for the Wii, kind of out of a happy accident. It's just how timing worked out. But still, you have those 3 games, and then the Wii had Twilight Princess, which was also on the GameCube, and Skyward Sword. And Skyward Sword is a great game, but it is definitely a little more controversial. Now, that's not to say Wind Waker wasn't controversial or Twilight Princess wasn't controversial. Pretty much every Zelda game has a bunch of discourse surrounding it, whether or not it's the best in the series or actually the worst. But Skyward Sword has definitely got kind of the grunt of it within the past decade or so. But I do think the HD remaster of this game on Nintendo Switch does make it a lot easier to respect this game and what it does differently. Because I think a lot of the things that a lot of people don't like about the game are honestly things that, for the most part, I don't think are actually bad, just more so like, you know, it's just doing Zelda a little differently than what you may like. You got Metroid Prime 1 and 2 on the GameCube, and then on the Wii, you got Metroid Prime 3, and then we got Metroid Other M, which, again, is more of a controversial title, but, you know, I mean, 2 Metroid games across both. But then we also got the Metroid Prime trilogy on Wii, which was an incredible deal. You got the first 2 Metroid Prime games from the GameCube remastered with Wii controls alongside Metroid Prime 3 all on 1 disc. Like, that was a stellar deal in 2009 for $50. So that's something that Nintendo did a couple of times. You got these new Play Control games, which were GameCube games put on the Wii with Wii Remote controls. Unfortunately, in the case of Pikmin, this was almost kind of the replacement for a brand new Pikmin title on Wii. Pikmin 3 was in development for Wii, but that eventually just moved right over to Wii U. But this kind of brings up an interesting point where the Wii didn't really have a huge amount of brand new franchises that were born on it. You know, there were things like the Wii series of games, which even though that series of games is definitely more of like a blank slate slate and there's not a ton of character, at the same time, there sort of is, you know? Like, people love the location of, like, Woohoo Island, which you saw in, like, Wii Sports Resort. People love the Mii characters and just kind of the funny, silly little things you can do in all of these games. You got Endless Ocean as well, which was a really interesting game, you know, just the fact that you have a scuba diving game. You know, there's been stuff like that before, but Endless Ocean was definitely a type of game that you could only really imagine Nintendo publishing. A lot of other companies would shy away from like outside the box kind of games like that, but I think that's what makes Nintendo so interesting, is the fact that they're like, oh, yeah, scuba diving simulator. How about Donkey Kong? We got Donkey Kong Barrel Blast on the Wii. That was originally meant to be a GameCube game to be used with the DK Bongos accessory, and you know, wasn't good. But then you have Donkey Kong Country Returns, which is one of the best 2D platformers of all time. And then you also got a new play control version of Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, which was yet again another game that used the DK Bongos, which that was honestly a really interesting thing that the GameCube did. But it also kind of sucked because, like, hey, the Wii got a brand new traditional Donkey Kong game. That's great. The GameCube, all the Donkey Kong games on this platform use the damn bongos. That's all Donkey Kong was during this era. It felt like they were kind of struggling to find out, like, oh, where do we go with Donkey Kong, you know? You know, they were just kind of doing, like, a bunch of spin-offs at the time. And Jungle Beat is a very interesting project. And it is a cool game, but I wouldn't say it's a game that I really want to play a ton of, you know? And just the fact that they designed a platformer where you control it with bongos is enough for me to call the game incredible. But that doesn't mean I really want to play it right now. Kirby, like I said, we only got Kirby Air Ride on the GameCube, and then on the Wii. Near the end of the Wii's life, we just got kind of a barrage of Kirby games, with Kirby's Epic Yarn, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, and Kirby's Dream Collection, each one year after another. And this was a great lineup, honestly. Like, Epic Yarn is fantastic, even if it doesn't do everything you'd really want a Kirby game to do. You know, it is kind of in that weird realm of like, oh, it's a spin-off, but it's also kind of mainline. I don't know. But then Kirby's Return to Dreamland was a great return to form for the series. You know, throughout the 2000s, Kirby was in a weird place, as you could clearly see with the series on GameCube. The fact that the only game that appeared was Air Ride, a spin-off racing game. And while it does have a ton of fans, I think the original Air Ride is a little more kind of like, you know, either you love it or it's just not your thing. While with the Kirby games on Wii, with something like Return to Dreamland, while that is kind of like a bit more of like a generic Kirby game, I think that's what the series needed, and it's something that you can respect, even if you're like, this is a little generic. It's kind of like, well, but it's like a really just good Kirby experience. Of course, we got the Mario spin-offs and whatnot, comparing Mario Kart Double Dash to Mario Kart Wii. You know, for a while there, I thought Mario Kart Double Dash was like way better than Mario Kart Wii, and I still love Mario Kart Double Dash, but looking at Mario Kart Wii objectively, like, there's just so much in that game. But I do think Double Dash's character is unmatched. Just the fact that you have the two-person per kart mechanic, like, that just makes that game so fun to revisit time and time again. Mario Kart Wii is still fun to this day, but I think Mario Kart Double Dash warrants a revisit way more than Wii. Even if I think Wii holds up a bit better when it comes to just like, hey, you know, the core driving mechanics, the core drifting mechanics, it just feels better than Double Dash. But I think Double Dash is just like, come on, it's so much cooler to jump back into that because it is so different. Mario Party games were all over the GameCube, which is surprising considering, you know, the Wii is kind of like that go-to mini game party game machine, you know, like that's what the Wii was all about. That's what all the shovelware was all about. But no, the GameCube is what got 4 damn Mario parties in a row. While on the Wii, we got Mario Party 8, which at this point, Mario Party was kind of running on fumes. Like, I like Mario Party 8, but compared to the games on the GameCube, it definitely felt like they were kind of running out of steam a little bit. And then you have Mario Party 9, which happened years later in the final year of the Wii's life until the Wii U dropped. And Mario Party 9 sucks. They tried to do something new and it failed. But still, I would say Mario Party way better on the GameCube. Every single Mario Party on this console is fantastic. My favorite is Mario Party 6 because it has a day and night mechanic and it uses the GameCube microphone, which is just kind of funny. I don't want to use the GameCube microphone. I just like the fact that it supports the GameCube microphone. You got every type of Mario sport on the GameCube with tennis, baseball, golf, strikers. And baseball and strikers were brand new on the GameCube. Like, we hadn't seen those sports before with Mario. And then the Wii, strangely enough, it only had two of them. It had a new strikers and a new baseball. They ended up doing a new play control version of Mario's Power Tennis from the GameCube, but no golf. And I just think that's weird. Maybe Nintendo didn't really want to push Mario Sports on the Wii just because Wii Sports was such a big deal that they were just like, well, you know, like why would we do this? But still, they put Mario Super Sluggers out on the Wii, and you know, you could play baseball in Wii Sports. So I have no idea why Mario Sports kind of took a bit of a break on Wii, but whatever. You got Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door versus Super Paper Mario. Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door. Super Paper Mario is cool, but it's also like, I mean, Thousand Year Door is literally like the best Mario RPG. Then we got one of the big ones. We got Super Smash Bros. Melee versus Brawl. Of course, I think Melee left like the biggest impact on the series. You know, every Smash Brothers after Melee pretty much followed Melee's template. And Brawl, unfortunately, had a couple of major sore spots. For one, the online multiplayer wasn't that great. Melee didn't even have online multiplayer, but whatever. And the gameplay itself, many people just didn't find it as engaging. It was much slower than Melee. You know, they wanted Brawl to be a little more casual friendly, which I can appreciate. You know, if I go back to Melee, like, yeah, the game is super fast paced and super tight, but I almost feel like for casual players, it's a little too hard to like feel like you're totally in control. Now, Brawl, I think, turned things down a little too much. So yeah, when I go back to Brawl, like, yeah, it is unbelievably slow. And of course, it notoriously has a massive problem, which is your character may randomly trip sometimes. That's stupid. But hey, listen, I grew up with Brawl. I think Brawl is one of the greatest packages of all time. Like, there's so much stuff in that game. It is unbelievable. It is such an obscenely detailed release. They had so much love and attention and time and quality and money poured into that game. It is absurd. So while I would agree, I think Melee does have like better overall gameplay, I think Brawl is still very good at what it does. And in most ways, I would say it is an upgrade. Of course, it isn't an upgrade in a lot of things that really matter to people, which is something like, you know, the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, but still, like, it's still Smash Brothers. It's still fantastic. But then we have a lot of the things where, how do we compare these two libraries? You know, the Wii had Wii Sports Resort. GameCube had Star Fox Adventures and Star Fox Assault and F-Zero GX, 1080 Avalanche, Wave Race Blue Storm. Now you had Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and then Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Then you just had a bunch of random crap on each platform. You know, the Wii had Excite Truck and Excite Bot. The GameCube had Geist and Eternal Darkness. Oh my god. Okay, well, in my opinion, first party wise, I think the GameCube had a more consistent lineup where pretty much every Nintendo franchise had a time to shine on the GameCube. Hell, we had a couple of big Pokemon games on the GameCube. Sure, they weren't like mainline releases. We got like Pokemon Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness, but they were RPGs. They may not have been like full-blown Pokemon RPGs, but they were like RPGs set in the Pokemon universe. And that was pretty cool. You know, I've always said this, but I think Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, that box art, it feels like they were really trying to make this look like an actual mainline Pokemon game. Like, this looks like a lot of the mainline Pokemon games. I'm sure you had Pokemon Battle Revolution on the Wii, but I never hear anybody talk about that game. Then you had Poke Park and Poke Park 2. I don't know, man. I got nothing to say about any of this stuff. GameCube introduced Animal Crossing to the world, and we got Animal Crossing City Folk on the Wii, which was an upgrade. But of course, a lot of people like love the original GameCube game. A lot of people will point to the fact that you can play like all those old NES games in there. And as cute as that is, I think people almost overly focus on the NES games and GameCube Animal Crossing. GameCube Animal Crossing is great, and I think it has like such a unique vibe to it that the other Animal Crossing games started to like move away from. Like, GameCube Animal Crossing is weird. City Folk is actually quite a bit more advanced than the GameCube game, but a lot of people kind of always just pissed it off as like, oh, well, this is just the DS game again, or this is just the GameCube game again. And it's like, yeah, but like, no, I understand and I agree with a lot of sentiments that it is very similar, but it's also like, you know, But yeah, as I was saying, I think GameCube's Nintendo lineup was more consistent. Almost every franchise got a new game. And I think a big thing here is pretty much every franchise that got a game on the GameCube, that game was generally really good. Even if it isn't your cup of tea, you know, Star Fox Adventures, may not be your cup of tea. Star Fox Assault is like a 7 out of 10 game, but it is a pretty good Star Fox game overall. You may not be a big fan of Super Mario Sunshine, but it is a good game. Like, it may not be a great game to you, but it is like, it's at least baseline decent. But like I said, I think the Wii has higher highs and lower lows. I think there's quite a bit of examples of games on the Wii that Nintendo released that just aren't really that great. You know, Wii Music was kind of lame. Donkey Kong Barrel Blast is lame. Mario Party 9 sucks. I forgot about Mario Sports Mix on the Wii, and that one's just kind of like, whatever, who cares? It's okay, I guess. And I feel like there's far more like controversial games on the Wii, stuff like Skyward Sword. A lot of people don't like Metroid Other M. Same with Super Paper Mario, you know, like either people love it or people hate it. But when you have games like this, man, or like Punch-Out on the Wii. Punch-Out on the Wii is incredible. Donkey Kong Country Returns. Sin and Punishment's star successor. Oh my god, that game is incredible. Rhythm Heaven Fever. I love Rhythm Heaven Fever. Oh my god, just such high highs on the Wii. But there's quite a bit more like stinkers compared to what Nintendo published on the GameCube. And honestly, I'd probably take the more consistent track record of Nintendo on the GameCube. Now, let's talk about third-party support. Again, I think GameCube was more consistent, higher highs, lower lows. But even then, I mean, like, the high highs on GameCube, they got Resident Evil 4 as an exclusive. That's about as high as you can fucking get. You know, Soul Calibur 2. You got Metal Gear Solid, The Twin Snakes, Time Splitters, Beautiful Joe, Beyond Good and Evil, Super Monkey Ball, Sonic Adventure 1, 2, Heroes, Mega Collection. And you consistently got all of the sports games from EA Sports. You got stuff like, oh, the first 2 Burnout games. Even though Burnout got really fucking good with Burnout 3, and that didn't come to the GameCube, and no other game after that did. But still, it felt like third-party support on the GameCube. They would always throw the GameCube a really good just trial run. Like, they might throw like a game or two from a certain series, and you know, they probably wouldn't do everything, but still. But for the most part, I think third-party games on GameCube pretty much just boiled down to a lot of licensed kids stuff. You know, back during these days, like, a lot of those games were actually not half bad. But yeah, you know, you weren't getting a lot of the stuff that people really wanted to play at the time. You might got a couple of the games, but not all of them. The Wii is kind of similar. Honestly, by comparison, I feel like the Wii got a lot more like random exclusive versions of games. You know, instead of Dead Space or Dead Space 2, we got Dead Space Extraction on the Wii. Like a rail shooter that was designed for the Wii. You know, instead of getting Soul Calibur 4, we got Soul Calibur Legends. Like, the Wii ended up getting like a lot of actual like exclusives, like Castlevania Judgment, that weird-ass Castlevania fighting game. And we got some weird-ass ports of games like Dead Rising, Chop Till You Drop. A lot of the Call of Duties came over, which was kind of cool. But I think a big problem is a lot of these games were severely downgraded graphically. Multi-platform releases were far better on the GameCube compared to the Wii, but you would usually get some cool stuff with the Wii release, most notably like motion control, which, hey, sometimes it was a hit, sometimes it was a miss, but a lot of times, many people really did like using the Wii Remote pointer in games like Call of Duty. And to be honest, looking at the third-party lineup on Wii, there's a lot of great hidden gems, or just games that people all know about. Stuff like Boom Blocks. Remember Boom Blocks? The Blob was really cool. You had Okami ported over from the PlayStation 2, but it always felt way more at home on the Wii because, you know, you could use the pointer to use your brush. Sonic Colors was an exclusive, like, mainline Sonic game. You had Silent Hill Shattered Memories, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, that was an exclusive. Zack and Wiki, House of the Dead Overkill. The Wii had a ton of stuff. However, they were definitely a lot more smaller titles compared to the stuff you were seeing on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I think looking back at the Wii, this is one of the most fun consoles to kind of dive into. As much crap as there is for this thing, it makes finding the hidden gems that much more enjoyable. Because a lot of companies really did put their all into the Wii. Like, as much as it's easy to say, oh, the Wii had crappy third-party support, like, honestly, it had a lot of third-party support. It just might not have been the third-party support that Xbox 360 and PS3 was getting. But for the most part, honestly, you were getting a lot of really unique, exclusive experiences on the Wii. However, I think all things considered, I do think the GameCube had the better library. I think the Wii's library is phenomenal. There's so much fun to be had. There's so many hidden gems, so many great third-party exclusives, Nintendo games. Even like the bad games on Wii are kind of fun to just mess around with. However, I think the GameCube has a far more consistent quality across the vast library it has. So I could honestly go either way. Like I said, Wii has higher highs, but I'm giving it to GameCube. And the final round here, legacy. Which one of these systems left a greater legacy? And this one is genuinely really hard. I don't know if I can figure it out right now. I was initially thinking GameCube, just because to me, I think the Wii, especially near the end of its life, there was a lot of kind of tumultuous feelings about it. People were ready to get this shit over with, you know? Like, but let's think about it. Like, how often do you hear music from the Me channel and Wii Shop channel pop up? Like, everywhere I look, if I'm watching videos on like social media or whatever, like it always pops up. People are so nostalgic over the Wii. And that's definitely more indicative of the time we live in, you know? It's just like, yeah, the Wii is roughly 20 years old, you know? Like, people are getting nostalgic over this. The GameCube, people are also nostalgic over this, but it's a little bit older, and people have had more time to be nostalgic over it, and overall, that nostalgia is somewhat drying up. Like, people don't have as much to be nostalgic over, so it's the Wii that's taken over, buddy. So it's hard, because nostalgia is definitely kind of like a giant cycle. You know, while the Wii is kind of the hot thing to be nostalgic over right now, in 10 years, nobody's gonna give a fuck about it anymore. Now, from my perspective, a lot of the Wii generation felt like near the end of it, things were definitely kind of getting a little like nostalgia focused. Like, as much as people are nostalgic over something like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, that game doesn't really do a ton that's unique to it. You know, Donkey Kong Country Returns is one of the greatest 2D platformers of all time, but it is kind of generic, all things considered. Now, you compare that to like what they were doing on the GameCube with like Mario Sunshine and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and it's just like, wow, this has all kinds of flavor and all that crap. But to be fair, you can point to other games on the Wii where it's just like, I think Galaxy is far more fondly remembered and left a far bigger impact on the Mario franchise and Nintendo as a whole than Sunshine ever did. And it's just like, yeah, of course Donkey Kong Country Returns is a little more generic because it's the return of the Donkey Kong Country formula. They needed things to be a little more like classic. Okay. Honestly, I think Legacy might have to go to Wii, just because I look at where Nintendo's at these days, and you can see, like, they are bringing back so much crap from the Wii. They're bringing back stuff from the GameCube too. But I definitely feel like Nintendo looks back at the Wii era and is really just kind of like looking at that like, man, this is where a lot of the meat was, man. The fact that on Nintendo Music, they have a playlist for all the Wii channels. I think the Wii feels the most like modern Nintendo. Now, of course, it does have kind of an advantage, considering it is a more modern console than the GameCube, but I do feel like the Wii unabashedly feels like what we all expect out of Nintendo. Something weird, something crazy. It may not be the best thing ever, or it could be. It could be the most incredible thing you ever experienced, or it could be the worst one, who knows? But, you know, no matter what, it feels like Nintendo. And as much as I love the GameCube, it kind of does feel like Nintendo was trying to make things work as a competitor with all the big boys. And that was great. You know, I love the GameCube. It is genuinely my favorite console. But I think in this battle, when it comes to legacy, I think the Wii left a bigger legacy and left a bigger impact on Nintendo as a whole. So for this round, the Wii wins it. 4-1, GameCube just has the game library win. Oh, boo-hoo, it has better games. These are both incredible video game consoles. In many ways, it could go either way. You know, I'm just babbling at this point. So, you know, truthfully, I could have been talking in a slightly different way, and the GameCube could have won every single round. Who knows? But these are both my childhood game consoles. I love them both dearly. With that being said, GameCube, you can go f*** yourself tonight.